was supposed to be a peaceful day on the open water. A group of whale watchers, a mix of tourists and seasoned wildlife enthusiasts, had boarded the Blue Horizon, a sturdy vessel designed to brave the open seas. The tour was led by Captain Evans, a grizzled sailor who had spent his life on these waters, and marine biologist Dr. Claire Sutton, whose passion for ocean life was infectious. The passengers had traveled from all over the world to witness the majesty of the ocean's gentle giants, humpback whales. The weather had been perfect when they set out. The sea shimmered under the sunlight, and the horizon stretched endlessly. But as the hours passed, dark clouds began to roll in from the distance, and the wind picked up, turning the once serene waters choppy and unpredictable. The air grew heavy with the scent of rain, and soon enough, a torrential downpour began, pounding against the deck of the boat. Captain Evans, always wary of the unpredictable ocean, considered turning back. But just as he reached for the radio to call in their location, Dr. Sutton spotted something in the distance.
There, a pod of humpbacks.
Passengers gathered at the railings, cameras and binoculars in hand. Despite the worsening storm, excitement filled the air as massive, graceful shapes broke through the surface of the churning sea. The whales were magnificent, their enormous bodies breaching and diving, undeterred by the chaos above the water. Even through the storm, their presence was awe-inspiring. But then, something changed. The whales began to behave erratically, their previously smooth movements now frantic and disjointed. They huddled together, their massive forms almost pressing against one another in a way that looked more like panic than play. Before anyone could answer, the water beneath the whales seemed to explode. An enormous shadow emerged from the depths, moving with impossible speed. A massive, gaping jaw broke the surface, revealing rows upon rows of jagged teeth. The creature was larger than anything they had ever seen, larger than the whales, larger than their boat. It was ancient, monstrous, a Mosasaurus. The beast's body surged out of the water, its prehistoric form dwarfing the whales it pursued. Its skin was a mottled gray-blue, blending with the storm-tossed sea, and its long serpentine tail whipped through the water with terrifying power. The Mosasaurus clamped its jaws around one of the humpbacks, the massive whale barely standing a chance as it was dragged beneath the surface with a sickening crunch. Blood surged into the ocean, staining the waves red. Screams erupted from the boat as the passengers watched in horror. The whales, once the masters of these waters, were now prey, helpless against this ancient predator. The Mosasaurus tore through the pod with savage efficiency, ripping apart another whale in a spray of gore, its huge tail sending violent waves crashing against the sides of the boat. "We need to get out of here, now!" Captain Evans yelled, his voice barely audible over the howling wind and crashing thunder. The crew scrambled to their posts, but the Mosasaurus wasn't finished. Drawn to the surface by the thrashing of the dying whales and the noise from the boat, it turned its attention toward the blue horizon. Its massive head rose above the water, eyes gleaming in the rain. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The storm, the sea, the terrified cries of the passengers. Then, with a surge of water that nearly capsized the boat, the Mosasaurus lunged at the vessel. The deck tilted sharply as the beast collided with the hull. Passengers were thrown to the ground, some sliding across the slick, rain-soaked wood, their screams mingling with the relentless roar of the storm. Dr. Sutton clung to the railing, her eyes wide with terror, as the Mosasaurus circled them like a predator, toying with its prey. The creature's jaws snapped inches from the boat, each bite coming closer and closer to tearing the vessel apart. Captain Evans tried to steer them away, but the sea was uncooperative. Waves the size of buildings crashed against the boat, making it nearly impossible to control. The Mosasaurus disappeared beneath the surface for a moment, and the passengers held their breath, hoping, praying, that it had lost interest. Then, without warning, it breached again, this time from beneath. The boat lurched violently into the air as the creature rammed it from below, sending people flying. Metal groaned and cracked as the boat's hull was splintered like a toy. The Mosasaurus's head emerged again, its massive jaws clamping onto the boat itself. With a terrifying screech of metal and wood, the blue horizon was lifted into the air. The Mosasaurus thrashed its head from side to side, and the boat began to come apart in its jaws. Passengers screamed as they were thrown into the water, disappearing into the storm-tossed sea. Dr. Sutton struggled to hold on, her fingers slipping from the railing as the boat tilted further, until finally she plunged into the cold, dark water below. The sea was a chaotic frenzy of rain, waves, blood, and thrashing bodies. The few who had managed to stay afloat were surrounded by wreckage and the remains of the whales. The Mosasaurus swam among them, its enormous body a dark shadow beneath the surface. Dr. Sutton struggled to stay above water, gasping for air as the waves crashed over her. In the distance, she could see Captain Evans clinging to a piece of debris, his face pale with shock. But before she could swim to him, the water around her churned violently. She felt a rush of cold water as something massive moved beneath her. She barely had time to scream before the Mosasaurus's jaws closed around her, dragging her into the abyss. In the end, the storm swallowed everything. The boat, the whales, the people. Gone, as if they had never been. The ocean, vast and indifferent, reclaimed it all. When the storm finally passed, all that remained was a scattering of debris floating on the surface and the calm, endless sea. The legend of the Mosasaurus, once dismissed as myth, became all too real that day. And the depths of the ocean, with all its ancient secrets and monsters, remained just as terrifying as ever. The ocean was supposed to be my home. For years, I had dedicated my life to studying its depths, a marine biologist fascinated by the mysteries hidden beneath its surface. I had been on dozens of expeditions, each more thrilling than the last, and yet nothing prepared me for the day we found Monster X. We'd heard rumors, stories passed between sailors about strange sightings, entire schools of fish disappearing overnight, and massive shapes spotted from afar. I didn't believe in sea monsters. Not really. But something about this expedition felt different, even as I told myself that it was just the excitement of exploring the uncharted trench we were heading towards. Deep down, though, I knew something was wrong. We set out on the Argonaut, a sturdy research vessel equipped with cutting-edge sonar and a submersible capable of withstanding the crushing pressure of the abyssal depths. It was supposed to be a routine exploration, just another day gathering data, tagging marine life, and documenting our findings. But then we picked up the signal. At first it was faint, barely a blip on our instruments. Something huge was moving in the trench, far larger than any known species. I told myself it was probably a massive whale, or maybe even a giant squid. But this was bigger, much bigger. "Prepare to dive," I said, my voice steady, hiding the growing unease gnawing at my stomach. Our small crew of 5 scrambled to ready the submersible. As we descended into the inky darkness, the sunlight above us faded, and the world outside turned into a void of black water. We were about 6,000 feet deep when we saw it. The sonar pinged, and I leaned closer to the screen. There it was, a massive, elongated shape moving slowly, deliberately. Its size dwarfed anything we'd ever encountered. My heart began to race, a cold sweat forming on my brow. The outline on the screen showed a creature that stretched well over 60 feet in length, and it was heading straight for us. "Is that a whale?" Jackson, the engineer, asked, his voice quivering. "No," I whispered, staring at the screen. "Whales don't look like that." Suddenly, the sub lurched. The lights flickered, and the whole vessel shuddered as if something had nudged us, testing us. The crew exchanged nervous glances, but I kept my eyes glued to the viewing port. Outside, there was nothing but black water. Then, from the shadows, it appeared. The creature, no, Monster X, drifted slowly past the sub, its massive body barely illuminated by our exterior lights. It was a Mosasaurus, but far larger than any species from the fossil record. Its grayish-blue skin was mottled with scars, each one telling the story of a beast that had ruled these waters for millennia, undisturbed, unseen. Its jaws were enormous, filled with rows of teeth like jagged daggers, and its cold, yellow eyes fixed on us with a terrifying intelligence. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. All I could do was stare at this ancient, impossible creature as it circled us, slow and deliberate, as if it was deciding what to do with us. "Full reverse," I heard Captain Brooks order, his voice tight with fear. Jackson fumbled with the controls, trying to pull us away, but it was too late. With a sudden burst of speed, Monster X rammed the sub. We were thrown against the walls as alarms blared. The lights flickered again, and I heard the sickening crunch of metal being torn apart. I scrambled to my feet and looked out the window. Its face was inches from the glass, those dead yellow eyes staring in, unblinking. It opened its mouth, revealing those rows of monstrous teeth, and bit down on the submersible. The entire vessel groaned under the pressure. Glass cracked. Water started leaking in from the side hatches. We were all shouting now, but I couldn't hear the words, just the sheer terror in everyone's voices. Monster X thrashed, dragging us deeper, as if it was playing with us, toying with its prey. The sound of metal being ripped apart filled the cabin. I turned to see the back of the sub buckle inward. The creature had torn a section of the hull away, like it was peeling back the skin of an orange. Jackson screamed as water rushed in, pulling him out of the sub and into the black abyss. He was gone in an instant, sucked into the void. I grabbed hold of the nearest railing, my knuckles white, my heart pounding so loudly I thought it would burst. I could hear the others shouting, but their voices were drowned out by the groaning metal and the rush of water. Monster X wasn't done with us. It slammed into us again, harder this time. The glass cracked further, spiderwebbing in front of me. Captain Brooks was shouting commands, but it didn't matter anymore. I knew, deep down, we were all going to die here. This wasn't a creature hunting for food. It was something far worse. A predator from an era before mankind. A thing of nightmares, still alive, still ruling the depths. And we had trespassed in its domain. The sub rocked violently as the Mosasaurus clamped its jaws around us again, shaking us like a rag doll. I could hear the screams of my crew, but they sounded distant now, as if they were happening in another world. The water was pouring in faster. My legs were soaked, the cold seeping into my bones. I thought about Jackson, pulled out into the abyss, and wondered if I would be next. The glass finally gave way with a deafening crack. I was sucked into the freezing water, dragged out of the sub by the immense pressure. The cold hit me like a wall, and I was disoriented, spinning in the black water. I looked up, if up even existed anymore, and saw the dim glow of the sub's lights fading as Monster X dragged it down. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. The Mosasaurus, Monster X, gliding silently through the water, its jaws slightly open, as if waiting. Its eyes found me, locking on with that cold, ancient hunger. It moved so quickly I didn't even have time to scream. The last thing I saw was its mouth opening wide, rows of teeth like knives closing around me. I've been obsessed with Monster X for as long as I can remember. Ever since I read those old, discarded reports, the ones written off as sailors' legends, dismissed by scientists as fiction, I couldn't shake the feeling that they were true. The Mosasaurus, this prehistoric behemoth, couldn't have just disappeared. Creatures that size don't simply vanish without a trace. They leave echoes in the water, shadows in the deep. And I'd been chasing those shadows for years. The obsession grew into something more, a sickness maybe. I spent my life savings funding expeditions, following leads that always ended in disappointment. Every murky sonar image, every vague sighting, led to nothing but dead ends. But I couldn't stop. I needed to prove it was real, not just to the world but to myself. That's how I found myself here, standing on the deck of a research vessel in the middle of the ocean. I had hired a group of marine scientists, not because they believed me, but because I paid them to pretend they did. They rolled their eyes when they thought I wasn't looking, whispered to each other that I was crazy. But none of that mattered. This time, I was sure. I had pinpointed the location, the trench off the coast of South America, where all the stories began, where Monster X was said to have been spotted centuries ago. I could feel it in my bones. It was down there, waiting. The scientists prepped the shark cage, triple reinforced steel, designed to withstand the jaws of a great white. But I wasn't hunting sharks. This was something far bigger. Still, I insisted on the cage. The others weren't going to get close enough to see the creature, not like me. If this thing was real, I had to see it with my own eyes. The murky water lapped at the side of the boat as the crew lowered the cage into the sea. I was inside, my hands trembling as I held onto the video camera. It wasn't fear, no, not yet. It was anticipation, adrenaline flooding my veins. The idea that I might be moments away from seeing the creature I had devoted my life to hunting filled me with a sick kind of excitement. The water was cold, wrapping around me like a shroud as I descended. The sunlight above faded, replaced by the eerie glow of the boat's lights reflecting off the surface. And soon enough, I was enveloped in darkness. The only sounds were the soft hum of the boat's engine and the faint creak of the cage as it swayed gently in the current. My heart pounded in my chest. The video camera was clutched tightly in my hands, its lens pointed out into the void. I scanned the waters, waiting, watching. At first it was nothing, just the murk of the deep, the shadows shifting with the movement of the water. My breath fogged the mask as I tried to steady myself. I'd been down here for what felt like hours, my fingers growing numb from the cold. The murky water clouded my vision, making it hard to tell if I was seeing anything at all. And then I felt it, a change in the water, something massive moving through the deep, a shadow darker than the surrounding blackness. My pulse quickened. I pressed the record button on the camera, my hands shaking. This was it. This was Monster X. The water became thicker, murkier, as if something had stirred up the seabed. My visibility dropped to almost nothing. I stared into the cloud of silt, straining to see, my breath coming in shallow gasps. "Come on," I whispered to myself. "Where are you?" I was expecting to see it gliding out of the darkness, its ancient form slowly materializing like the predator it was. But it didn't happen that way. It happened all at once. A massive shape exploded from the void, faster than I could process, its enormous jaws agape. It slammed into the cage with such force that the entire structure shuddered violently. I was thrown back, the video camera knocked from my hands, tumbling into the blackness below. Panic surged through me as the Mosasaurus, the Monster X, bared its jagged teeth, its prehistoric eyes locking onto me. It was far larger than I had ever imagined. This wasn't just some animal. It was a living nightmare, a relic from an age when monsters ruled the earth. Before I could react, it struck again, its teeth sinking into the metal bars of the cage. The screech of twisting steel filled the water. The cage, the one designed to hold off the most powerful predators of the sea, was being peeled apart like paper. "No! No! No!" I screamed, thrashing against the cage, trying to hold on to the bars as the Mosasaurus began to tear it open. I could feel the water rushing in as the metal bent and snapped, the cage crumpling around me like a tin can. I had been so stupid, so blinded by my obsession. This wasn't something I could control. I wasn't going to capture it on film, wasn't going to prove it to anyone. I was going to die down here. The Mosasaurus bit down again, its massive teeth ripping through the cage with ease. One of its teeth caught my leg. The pain was immediate, white hot, as I felt my flesh tear. Blood clouded the water, swirling around me in a crimson haze. I screamed, but the sound was lost in the depths. It didn't matter. There was no one down here to save me. With a final, violent pull, the cage was ripped open. The Mosasaurus lunged forward, its jaws clamping down on my midsection. The pain was unbearable, a tearing, crushing agony as its teeth sank into my flesh, ripping me apart. I felt my body go numb as I was torn in half, my lower torso swallowed in a single gruesome bite. I was still alive, somehow still conscious as I floated in the water, my blood pouring out into the sea. My vision blurred, and the cold set in, deeper than before. I had spent my life chasing a monster, a fleeting thought in the mind of something far older, far more powerful than I could ever understand. The last thing I saw before everything went black was the cold, dead eyes of Monster X, and I realized, far too late, that some things were never meant to be found.